Exciting transfer news as Redmond FC announces a new long-term signing. We send our best congratulations to the manager Robbie and his director of football who's keeping him in tow. We are very excited to see how this signing progresses over the next couple of seasons. Congratulations, and now on with the show.
I'm not into podcasts.
I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again. What a hit!
Back of the net.
Hello, this is the Not a Pundit podcast. I'm Killian Ginnity. I'm delighted to be joined by Not a Pundit Conor Glennon.
How you going, Killian?
I'm good, but I could be a whole lot better after that weekend. Ireland did get a win against Gibraltar, the mighty Rock of Gibraltar, but a devastating loss against Greece. Conor, Stephen Kenny, is it time that he's gone?
I think it's a case of put the man out of his misery. I have to say I did feel bad when he was evidently crying after the Greece game, and no one likes seeing that. But I think personally I never thought he should have got the job. I think it was too big for him. I think he did great things with the 21s. I think it was too big for him. He's had more than enough time, and I think, you know, when you look at it comes down to percentages, wins and losses. I know he's tried to change the football that we play, and arguably he has in some perspective. And yes, there's the argument we don't have the players to play the football that he wants. But you know, going into that Greece game, he'd won 5 games in the last 25 or something like that, and it's just not good enough, you know. And I think even as you said there, we got a win against Gibraltar, but that win even felt like a loss to me, you know. What about you? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think his time is up, but I think that was decided on board level. I don't know if money-wise they can really afford to get rid of him just yet. I think they might have to wait until it's a certainty that they can't qualify, and there's probably a break clause or some kind of reduced compensation.
But I think out of just dignity for him, just you're gonna have to pay him either way, whether he's sitting in the chair or he's not. Just give him the room to just not make a fool of himself, you know.
But this is where you can't help the man on fire if he won't stop running.
Well,
so he seems like he doesn't want to leave, and he's going to go out until the bitter end, which I can't begrudge, but I just don't like it. My League of Ireland team is Dundalk. That's where I went to college, and I was there for the glory days, like Richie Towell, Darrell Horgan leading us into Europe, and it was fantastic. And he hasn't been able to replicate that kind of a form. He, for a good while, did kind of harness that kind of feel-good energy, but it seems to just be turning bitter between him and the media, him and the fans, potentially even him and the board. But when you see, which is quite heartening, when you see Gus Poyet's comments about the Ireland job, maybe not all hope is lost after. Maybe we are actually in a healthy situation going forward after Kenny.
I think so, and it was nice to see that sentiment around Ireland. I think going back to your point on Dundalk, I think no one's taken away the job that he did in the League of Ireland. He did absolutely fantastic things to obviously get him into the position to be considered for the Ireland job. But I do wonder, are we verging into a Harry Maguire situation the longer he keeps that job? There's, you know, I know how you can't put the man on fire who keeps running out, but I think we just need to find a way, because he's kind of on that, not to keep going on the sayings, but he's kind of the captain of Titanic at the minute. He's going down with that ship regardless, and there needs to be a lifeboat there. I really, really, don't get me wrong, I do not want him in the Ireland job. I do not. I just, we're better off even with, I don't like Keith Andrews. I don't see him as the future of this team, but we're just give it to Keith for a couple of months and just let Stephen go into the abyss.
After his accusations against Poyet and using an Irish spy, I don't know if Keith's
actually sorry,
now,
John O'Shea.
No.
Give it to John O'Shea.
John's too busy with Wazza.
Well, that's the thing.
Birmingham.
Yeah, fair.
He's a man that's actually wanted around the place, which is great to see. Maybe down the line once he gets a little bit of experience, but there does seem to be a little bit of a last throw of the dice from Kenny with the little hint that there could be another player declaring eligibility for Ireland. He's stopped it going as far as to say who, but the reports is that it's an English-based championship winger.
I mean,
so
there's a good few of them, but I mean,
no, but this is the thing. There's not that could be Irish eligible. So like, it kind of is he claiming that somebody's a winger that's actually not a winger, or is it going to be like Marcus Harness, who actually declared for Ireland in 2019? I don't know if he ever finished the paperwork or whatever, but it's like, if that's the case, then
no, it's like, you see, this is the thing. It's like it seems a bit last stitch to me to be like, oh, I've got this wonder kid in the background, keep me around and he'll come with me, and then I'd be more impressed if it was bloody Joe Bellingham that he had potentially in there, but
in Job we trust.
I mean,
but this is the funny thing, that some of the names that are being thrown now, not Job, because Job apparently was being scouted at Sunderland by Real Madrid. So I think it'll be the Bellingham brothers.
Imagine that. Just imagine that. Oh my God, that would be. I'd love that.
As long as there's a massive sell-on fee for us, I don't give a fuck. But the funny thing about the Sunderland connection is that the names being rumoured, now they're not all wingers. Some of them are. I don't know how eligible a lot of these are. I know some of them are. But a lot of them are Sunderland. So maybe we could get like a little Irish reunion back and then kind of go, hey, Job, you're not making it to the England team.
Come over to our shores and have some fun.
So the names that I've seen is Jack Clark, who is ripping it up for Sunderland.
And we've talked about him a good bit in this podcast and our love of him. I mean, I would adore him in a green shirt. I would think he would want a white shirt, though, if I'm honest.
Well, the bigger concern is I think his only connection to Ireland is the fact that his agent is Ian Hart.
Oh, right.
So who knows? Like they could pull a granny out of the closet or the grave or wherever. Another name from Sunderland is Patrick Roberts, formerly of Celtic and Man City fame. Very, very good. Again, I don't know if there was rumours back when he was at Celtic in 2016 that he could be Irish eligible, but that could have been them just hoping for an Irish connection. But if we could get him, he'd be amazing. He's not going to light the world on fire, but when he is on form, he's fantastic. And he'd be kind of like, I could see him kind of be like a Houlihan role, like a Wessie role for us, whereas that kind of like he can make a little bit of magic when he does. He's not always going to do it.
Yeah.
Like he's not always going to do it, but I'd rather have him there as an option. One who is born in Ireland, has played for the under-21s for England, but is also eligible for Latvia, but has been called out by Mourinho as a fantastic youth prospect, was Dennis Serkin, a left-back.
Where do I know
very,
that
very
name?
well.
Where do I know that name from?
He was at Spurs when Mourinho was there. He was the left-back that he brought through really young.
Okay.
Absolutely doing class with Sunderland. He went relatively young to Sunderland. The deal was a sell-on clause and a buyback fee. So Spurs kind of have the deal covered, and he's done well with Sunderland. Like he's our go-to left back, and he's had a few concussions over the last couple of years, which kind of maybe slowed him a little bit. But he's doing very, very well. Can play even kind of on a left side of a three. So
that seems positive.
Yeah, if you play him at a position, he could be a winger. Like he could be an advanced fullback. So he'd be great. And he is Irish eligible, but he has no connection to Ireland.
One thing I think it would be great if we could get, like, even throw my Newcastle lenses off for a minute. Like a Sunderland player, I don't care where they're from, if they play good ball and then they're willing to play for Ireland. But I mean, if you can get 2-3 lads that are used to be playing it with each other at club level, that's a big deal for Ireland. Like, there's familiarity there, and I know, like, look, those guys aren't going to stay at Sunderland forever, but that could be great for the boys in green. Yeah,
and just to rattle off the last couple of names, one Newcastle player that hasn't been mentioned too much because I think he'd be maybe beyond our remit right now, but who is Irish eligible, and another friend of the show, Anthony Gordon.
Oh, yeah. My pal.
I'd take him. Like he may play for a scummy team, but like I'd take him.
I just don't think. I think his ego's too big for that.
Yeah, I think best case internationally for him is that at the age of 30 he'll end up playing for Scotland and get 30 odd caps, but he'll be their main player for that for that 3-year period. Other names are Casey McAteer at Leicester, who's doing very well.
Jason's kid?
No, I don't think they're related.
Okay.
It's just same name. But he's kind of broken through and has a couple of goals in, like, I think he has 3 or 4 goals in 8 league appearances for Leicester, and they're ripping it up in the Championship, so it would be very good. One of his Leicester's mates is Kieran Drewsbury Hall, who was once linked with kind of like being
You've talked
an
about
England
him.
level
Yeah, you've
player.
talked about him before.
Yeah, he's good, but I think he's like 24, maybe 25 now. So, but I believe he's like a centre attacking midfielder.
All these names though, like, it's like they can't do worse than what we've got. Like, I'd try all of them.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. One who has obviously been mooted and should have been in and around the squad is Tom Cannon. He just has to make a decision on if he wants to live a life of wishing for an England cap, and maybe best hope of being Patrick Bamford 2.0. Another one who was at one stage, like, I think he still does play for them, but he was like the key figure for the England under-21s, is Liam Delap, Rory's son.
yeah. I've heard a lot about him actually. He's meant to be decent.
Yeah, but the one kind of concern with him is that, like, his dad played for Ireland, but like I think it was Rory's granny was the real
So his
Irish
great
connection.
granny at that point.
Yeah, so like he can play because obviously the dad has the Irish one, but I don't know if he has enough of a connection. Now, saying that, I think he's at Stoke now and kind of fell out of favour at the City Academy, so it's kind of like, is there enough love of England to try and maybe hold out and or just not get caps?
What I don't understand is, if you're like, we don't know what Liam Delap could turn into, right? But say he's a middle of the road player, he's contractually going to earn more if he's an international regular player, and if you go to Ireland and become a regular player, like, financially it's going to work for you. What's better, to earn more in your career, get international experience, and make some amazing memories and possibly history, or hold out to maybe ride the bench twice for England, you know?
Yeah. Like, he could end up being a Gabby Abon-Lahore, like.
Yeah, and like,
Yes,
like, I'd rather do a Danny Gabadon for Gibraltar than that, you know?
Or become like Kevin Doyle, where you're an absolutely fine Premier League player or Championship player, but you'll get a good load of caps, and then you'll have a career in punditry in the country.
And his wages were increased off the back of that. He got commercial deals out of it. It
worked for Clinton Morrison.
There's plenty of cases for it. And I think the other thing that we've talked about before in the pod is, like, your chance to be a cult hero is much more likely if you play for someone like Ireland. And that in itself, you do a Shane Long type goal against Germany, you'll be remembered forever. You're sorted.
There is a couple of other names that are less so being discussed, but they have been mentioned, and I don't believe them, but some of them I take. One of them is ex-Sunderland player Lyndon Gooch, who has a couple of caps for America, but I think they were all before 21, and that new rule, if you get the caps before a certain age and there's a certain amount of years in between since getting them, that you can then redeclare. So he was born in America, basically raised in Sunderland, but he's also Irish eligible. Is he good enough? Maybe not, but he's a workhorse, and
give him a go.
Yeah, he's like lower Championship level. But the name that I'd be very interested in, he's a Premier League player now, is Nathan Redmond.
I'd take that all day long.
So he has one cap for England, and he got that at like 20, and he's now 27, 28, maybe even 29. He's also eligible for Jamaica, so I think if we don't take him up on it, I think Jamaica will.
Yeah, they will.
So I'd rather have him at our disposal than theirs.
I'd absolutely move on him, 100%. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Couple of games, see what he's made of. I'd absolutely do. And even to have that Premier League caliber within the squad, like, I know we've got some players in the Premier League in the team, but it's never bad to have more.
But no matter who declares, I don't think to be playing under Stephen Kenny for too long.
No, they will not. I know we've talked before about who the potential replacements are going to be. I think that's one for another pod, because I think we don't even know where we're we're gonna have the pleasure of Stephen Kenny for. But I think one thing before we move off, Stephen, is do you think he goes back to the League of Ireland? Is that his level?
It's a very hard one because I actually think he's a better manager than League of Ireland. Like, he's the most successful League of Ireland manager of say, modern history anyway.
Him or Fenlon, really.
Yeah, but I think because of the European nights,
yeah,
and being a biased, I'd side with Kenny. But like, he's failed in Scotland before. So does he go in as maybe like a director of football with somewhere? Kind of use that kind of FAI links. See, this is what's kind of annoying me about like him hanging on for dear life for the position. Is I think he would have made a very good advisory board member on the FAI or someone in that kind of like development.
Yeah.
But the more bitter he makes this, it makes it impossible.
He's messing it up for himself, and like it's the same thing with like there's.
He'll end up being Brian Kerr.
That you took the name out of my mouth. That is exactly what I was about to say. Like Brian Kerr. People can say what they want about him, and I know he's a talking head to some people, but that man is an encyclopedia. That man knows Irish football better than I think any human alive, and the fact he's not involved in the fold is criminal. Now I wouldn't want him back as manager, I wouldn't want him director of football, anything like that, but the fact he's just not in it at all, Kenny's putting himself in the same shoes as that, and like, look, we're a small nation, we need to use all the minds that we can. So I would love to have both of them involved in that position, but the way they've gone about their tenure, it's not really possible.
No, but there is a tenure that could be coming to an end sooner rather than later. Man United could be moving on from the Glazers, who most United fans would think have been terrible owners, and this is kind of where I wanted to go this week, is terrible owners, because we'll park United for a minute because we'll get to them. Me and you both have plenty of experience with terrible owners. Sunderland fan to Newcastle fan, we may be rivals, but we are brothers in blood with the blood of the teams. Obviously, you've had Mike Ashley over recent years, and Sunderland have had more than a few.
I think this is going to be like a game of top trumps. I think this is going to be tit for tat. Yeah, like we may have had Ashley, but we also had Fat Freddy before him and Sir John Hall, and just feels like before the recent takeover, it's been a long old trip, but you guys didn't have it much better, to be fair.
Yeah, it'd be top trumps therapy. So like Sunderland, once we got relegated on the Big Mick, and he was kind of shuffled aside, Niall Quinn came in with the Drummondville Consortium and brought a new lease of life, well-managed club, brought in Keane, got us back to the Premier League. It was fantastic. There was like that, like obviously having a cult hero back. He's an icon for the club as a player, but then he came in and brought in money as well and was willing to spend. He brought in a bit of glamour with Keane. And not only glamour, successful glamour, that's fantastic. And he was only after being retired, plenty of eyes from Ireland, brought in a lot of Irish players, which for me was the reason I got into Sunderland. But then had like Dwight York playing for Sunderland in the Championship, which is just like, yeah, he may be Dwight York over the hills, but he's Dwight York playing alongside.
He was still decent, to be fair to him, and it was exciting.
And he was playing as a holding midfielder at times, which is fantastic. And then we get promoted, and they were backed. Like Craig Gordon at £9 million was the British goalkeeping transfer record for longer than most people realise. And then getting the likes of Ken Wayne Jones, and like they did well. And then Quinn did the clever thing and then sold us to a billionaire, which on paper seemed perfect because he was, I'm not sure if he was part of the Drummondville, but he was definitely associated with those involved with the Drummondville. So it was Ellis Short, who was an Irish-American. Texas is where he's from. And basically how he made his money was asset stripping.
Oh, great. What a lovely partner.
Absolutely. But in his defense, he spent stupid money. And he spent it stupidly. So he would hire a manager, back them to the hilt, it would fail, and then he'd try it again. And like, in fairness, he kept trying. But then at one stage he had Defanti, then agent, he's now a pundit with Sky for transfers, as our director of football, with Paolo Di Canio as our manager. We brought in something like 11 or 12 players for free and expected them to stay up, which they did.
But that's like a non-league approach to things. Like, that's just, like, you can't be at that at the top level.
But, like, why get an agent who's never been a director of football to be your director of football? And what did he go and do? He hired players he was associated with. Like, you're asking for trouble. But, like, he spent big and things did work out. He brought in Asamoah Gyan after the 2010 World Cup.
That worked out.
A touch of class.
Yeah.
Brought in Darren Bent. That worked out. They turned a profit. But he poisoned that because he wanted them out to get the extra money. He did well with Steve Bruce. And then he got rid of Bruce when it didn't work out. So we had a stupid amount of managers. It wasn't great. And it culminated in Moyes dragging us down. Bearing in mind, his first or second press conference was saying, yeah, we're probably going to go down. But
not the best start.
Ellis Short said when he hired him, this is the manager I've wanted for years.
Do you think he believed it, or was it just pure press fire?
Oh, no, I absolutely believe he was trying to get Moyes from his United sacking.
Right.
But he didn't do any real research, or, to be honest, his main problem was he didn't have a football brain beside him. He didn't have what Sunderland now have with the likes of a Christian Speakman, kind of going, listen, no, you don't have to spend 16 million on Didier Indong. Jan Mvia, we have an agreed fee for 6 million. He wants to be here. He literally arrived at the airport. Just get him. Yeah. Worst case scenario, he's the same player. He's a couple of years older. So, like, something like that, where you just have somebody go, listen, he's an unknown prospect. Here's the one that we know. You're going to spend half the money, and worst case scenario, you end up the same. Best case scenario, it gets better. But then, and so those that have watched Sunderland Till I Die should know this story. So Ellis Short eventually works to sell the club, but he did bring in former Rangers director Martin Bain, and again, he was another known to be kind of asset stripper in the football terms, kind of going, listen, I'll get your club run lean and mean. And he did. He did some good stuff. He got Jack Rodwell off our case because they agreed a 60 grand a week contract with no relegation clause, because great business. And over the space of a year and going through a couple of managers, eventually coming in with Chris Coleman, and which was a little too little too late. We had the likes of like Lewis Graben come in on loan, do very well, and as soon as he realised his stock was high, left. And at the time, very bitter and angry about it. In retrospect, can't really complain. And eventually, we were taken over by the wonderful Stuart Donald, season 2 of Sunderland Till I Die, who was chairman of Eastleigh, a National League club, and he did very, very well with them, spent big money for them. But he leveraged his buying off of parachute payments. So he was basically saying,
this sounds familiar.
You know that there's X amount going to be coming into the club. You keep them, we'll take the club. And again, not to be so, like, many Sunderland fans would not have a whole lot of love left for Ellis Short, but he left the club debt free. Which,
to be honest with you, is a huge thing.
A lot of the debt was to him, so he just wrote it off.
Okay.
So it's not the biggest thing, but it can't be understated either. So then Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven came in. Techno music continues from the Netflix piece, and they just didn't know what they were doing. Way overspent on Will Grigg, trying to appease fans, spent way too much time on Twitter messaging fans instead of just actually running the club, brought in all of his mates.
Again, sounds familiar.
He made a former Eastleigh defender our head of academy when he had like basically no qualifications to do so. And then he started selling parts of the club. So he did a deal with Juan Satori, and it was all big promises about we're going to have all these Uruguayans coming in, youth players, and then Juan Sartori ran for president for Uruguay, so he's just not seen again. And then he toyed with selling part or all of the club to one of Michael Dell's investment shells. So Michael Dell was involved in the shell, but he wasn't the one running it, but a load of his right-hand men were.
So he's profiting off it, basically.
Yeah, he was involved, and his name was attached, which was cool. But that all culminated in like a £5 or £10 million loan. And basically what this group have done since, and they did it with Derby when Derby were in financial ruin, they would go lend you so that you can get better clarity on the club and the finances and all, and you either default on the loan and they get the club, or you pay them back, or they continue on with the deal.
So it's pawn shop tactics, really.
Yeah, and in fairness to the Dell group, that's clever business. Like, cool. But it was not what we wanted to be seeing from our brand new owner who said, "Oh, I'm going to get you back to the Premier League."
Not exactly, no.
No. And then eventually, through Juan Sartori, who is the son-in-law of the Russian oligarch who owned Monaco and spent all the money on James Rodriguez and all them, so he's used to being around money, we got the deal with the current owner, Cyril Louis Dreyfus, cousin of Julia from Seinfeld, Julie Louis Dreyfus. He's my age. He's actually younger than me. He's like,
which is wild.
Just turned 25, and he owns Sunderland, and he's the chairman, and he's running it fantastically.
You do love to see it, like you do.
Oh, you do. But the thing about it was, Donald and Methven hung on to every percentage they could until it got paid off. So they ran the club on peanuts. They went through a couple of managers, didn't back them. Like the amount of summers that what we thought were going to be clever deals, get a load of these lads in on little to no money and get us through the league and back up, and they just didn't turn out to be. And the best thing I could say about him was that at least he sold the club. Like, it's only in the last 3 months that he's finally out of the club. It took a year and a half to get rid of him after the club was acquired by somebody else. And even down to that, he in the negotiations with KLD, he held on for all the sporting control that he could. But now we're in a healthy place. We're fantastic. There hasn't been this positivity around the club since Ellis Short came in, when we all thought we were going to be going to the moon and back. But you've had that kind of same roller coaster ride over on Tyneside.
We have indeed, and it's funny seeing both Newcastle and Sunderland actually in a good place for once. Borough aren't doing too bad either. Their form's coming back up, so things are good up in the northeast. But yeah. I think everyone knows probably slightly more about Newcastle over the last 10, 15 years due to the recent takeover and the trials and tribulations of that and the attempted takeovers before that. But I think for those who don't really know, I think if I could sum it up in one sentence, the Ashley era was devoid of all hope. He beat us down to a point where staying up was like winning the league. When he first came into the club, I along with most fans were positive about him. He was on the stands having pints with people. He'd buy pints for home fans, away fans. He seemed like a bit of a party animal, which, you don't really want your owner being that, but he seemed like one of us, and I think it became apparent pretty quickly that he wasn't that guy, because he didn't do his due diligence on the club, and he found that with 57 million in stadium debt that had to be repaid within 60 days, not the best phone call to get, so that in itself kind of suggests, this guy didn't, if he's not spotting things like that, what is he spotting around the club? And over the years, it just kept getting worse. We got relegated twice. We finished above 10th once, with Pardiola, in 2011, 2012. But then,
which in his defense, like with the Pardew era and the scout car, like when they did well with them French players and all, like you were doing very good.
We were doing amazing, and the likes of Johan Kabay fans are still angry at him that he left, you know, and God bless Czech Tiote, who unfortunately passed away far too young. We had some canny players, we had Colaccini, just really...
Dembaba, Papi Cisse,
like Ben Arfa,
Jones Gutierrez.
Like, we really had a tidy unit. I think what summed us up, though, was Pardew saying this team is going to be an English team, and we basically had the French national team. And even with Pardew, I think that was another example of, you know, we did well with Pardew for that 1 year, and he gets an 8-year deal, of which he lasted 2 years on. We were paying him from 2012 to 2020, and he left in 2014. You know, like, it's
Wow.
absolute lunacy. You know, when keeping on the manager's point, you know, we 10 managers in the 14 years. We lost the likes of Rafa, we lost Keegan. You know, Rafa was a manager that we had no right having at all. You know, I mean, and his reasons for leaving, it's not like, you know, he got tapped up by Real Madrid. His was just down to lack of investment in the academy and the training ground. He was like, you know, I'm doing the best I can here, but I'm kind of in a way that Mourinho was at United, where he completely went above his station of what was possible. And even then, going back to kind of the Sunderland side of things with the asset stripping. So, like, he sold off the land that we had for the stadium expansion for tiny fee. If you look at he changed the stadium name to the Sports Direct Arena, which, look, you know where I stand as a football fan and the changing of names, but if it's financially beneficial, it can be less of a hard pill to take. But then it comes out that for all the Sports Direct hoardings around St James's Park, Sports Direct were paying Newcastle £83,000 a year.
Jeez.
So commercially, it's not working for us. You know, investment wise, there's no money going in. Like I said, we were beaten down to the point of, let's face it, we were relegation fodder for years upon years upon years. And even in that good year where we finished 5th, no one believed that was going to happen again. That was like Leicester winning the league. It was a complete fluke. And it was great, and some of the best games I've ever seen live were that year. But, you know, I think the thing that sums him up the most as a shit owner, apologies for the French, is his treatment of Jonas Gutierrez. And for those that may not know about that, Jonas was a long-term servant of the club. Unfortunately, ended up having to battle cancer. And during that, normally in a club, you say when Arjen Robben had a brush with testicular cancer, Chelsea sent him to the best people. They took all the expense on themselves. There was no doctor that wasn't contacted, no opinion that wasn't got. Jonas was left out in the cold. Jonas got no financial support. The club doctors weren't allowed to speak to him. He was looked at like, okay, you were an asset for this club. Now you're not. Good luck and good night.
Bearing in mind, after a couple of bouts of treatment, he actually had played and scored a crucial goal at one stage for you.
And this is the thing. So he came back. He basically 10 or more appearances. I can't remember exactly how many he had. After being the all clear, like you said, he scored and assisted in the game against West Ham that kept us up, and he got released that summer. And the reason he got released is he was only played for around 10 games. If he hit 15, it enacted a year extension on his contract, and he ended up suing them and won. He basically it came out that Ashley had told the manager, do not pick him. We do not want to extend his contract. So I think the best way I've kind of seen this put is simply put. He put profits over club success, and there's a part here from an article that will be going up on our freshly made website soon. Definitely take a look at. There's not just this article. There's plenty more there, so have a look around. But if you'll indulge me for a second, and the bleakness of Ashley's era will never be forgotten. A club with an energy like no other in the land, reduced to a balance sheet, reduced to pure corporatism, a grind, a chore, a number. Just like a shift at Sports Direct, you didn't want it to arrive and you just wanted it to end. A football club can fail, it can fall short, but it must always be through the intention of ambition to defend itself bravely. Ashley's attempts at participating in the sporting world were just the opposite. Pure cowardice. A cowardly attempt to belittle, demoralise and destroy, in our opinion, myself and the contributor for this piece, the greatest football club in the world. But as the old chant goes, Newcastle United will never be defeated. And for me, I think that sums up the entire 14-year reign of absolute misery that you must have thoroughly enjoyed as a Sunderland fan.
Oh, absolutely, because that's when we had our great run against you. But that was beautifully written. But as I learned with Sunderland, there is brighter days ahead.
And we're in those days, and, you know, I never would have seen them. You know, there've been so many attempted takeovers, and I say attempted in air quotes because very similar to Man United, there was questions for a lot of years of, is it pure optics and is it actually wanting to be sold? And, you know, we didn't get sold for that much money. It's not a United situation where it's talking billions. We went for 350 million. Like, I mean, you could win the Powerball and buy Newcastle. Like, it's not like,
I'm sure the stadium alone is like probably worth a third of that.
That's what I mean. You know, you bring into the assets and you're looking at if anything, the PIF got an absolute steal on this, you know. And look, yeah, it's working out for them in at the moment, and long may that continue. And we're in glory days now, but I think it's one of those ones that, you know, we'll discuss it more as the pod goes on. But it seems the Premier League have this owners test, but it seems to be like a finger painting test, because any crap owner can, like, if myself and yourself came upon 350 million, we could have bought Newcastle. It would have been allowed, like, you know. And I think, you know, both cases of Newcastle and Sunderland now have even the likes of asset stripping, or what's the common tie between the two of us? Rangers. Who owns Rangers? Ashley. You know, like, it's this multi-club ownership. It's not even bad enough that they ruin one club. They ruin plenty of clubs. But I think actually one last point, apart from the Jonas piece, was in 2020 he put the club's non-playing staff on furlough. For a Premier League club, like, it's, you know, look, the COVID pandemic smashed the accounts of many businesses around the world, but I think a Premier League club can afford to play their non-paying staff, because I think the non-playing staff are the key figures in a club. They're the ones that make the trains go on time. They're the dinner ladies. They're the bus drivers. They're the ticket men. And yeah, there's no games going on, so there's no job for them to do. But most of those people will have been there for 10, 20 years, or their dad was there for 20 years and they've come into it. So for me, it's a real summation of the man.
And after this short break, we will be kind of getting the lowdown on a near 20-year glorious tenure of the Glazers at United. Be back after this. Thanks for listening to the Not a Pundit podcast. If you haven't already, check out our social channels at Not a Pundit Podcast. We are on Twitter, or X. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. And now we're also at notapundit.ie, our new website where you're going to get the latest episodes, discussions, and even the odd quiz. What's not to like? Notapundit.ie, part of the Not a Pundit network. Welcome back to the Not a Pundit network. Thanks for sticking with us. And the last week has been a roller coaster for United fans. Could it be? Is it all over? Well, we're going to find out from the man, the myth, the legend, United Plug's own Nathan Byrne. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be on here with such a turbulent time for the club. As you both were speaking about your own experiences with ownership, it's probably the one subject in football that cuts the deepest, I'd say, off the field. So yeah, basically Sir Jim Ratcliffe looks like he's about to take over 25% of the club. With that comes the sporting aspect. So like he'll take over the day-to-day running, who's the manager, who's the background staff. there's been very little said about what the Glazers' involvement to that will be, which is the worrying part in my corner. But yeah, so for the listeners at home that don't know about the Glazers, well, you have 20 years of information to catch up on there. It basically started with Malcolm Glazer, who's the father of the 7 siblings that currently own Manchester United to this day. He bought a very small percentage of the club initially, and from that he kept buying small shares on whether that's the stock market or private deals. One of the things that he did do was buy a large share of JP McManus, who that actually took him over the 30% needed to actually forcefully launch a takeover bid. So he was forced into it at that point. Now, he fully knew that when he bought that share, so he was fully on course to take that over. So
it wasn't like he's been held to ransom, just
exactly
hundreds of millions here.
Yeah.
and that came off the back of a conflict as well. That was a racehorse that ended up in those shares going the wrong way, but that's probably for another
exactly
day.
That was about a racehorse. So to talk about how conflicting that could be back then, it's like, maybe we wouldn't have gone through the 20 years if it wasn't for that racehorse, but who might say that? So overnight he had to launch that takeover bid, and it was actually in one night that he went and bought the rest. That actually took him up to 58%, which made him the majority owner of Manchester United. And then from there he actually got all the way up to 98% of the club he bought it for just under £800 million. Now, for how much that's going today,
of its era though, that's a hell of a lot of money.
It is, and obviously through inflation and stuff, like we probably don't know what the true figure is that today, but I'd imagine he made a good investment back on that. So yeah, like for such a small price at the time, looking back on it now, it's like to be where they are now, and have the £5.2 billion bid go in from the Qatari ownership structure. It's like, as a fan, you sort of feel like, how can't you accept that? You know what I mean? Like,
am I right in saying that the initial amount that 800 million he bought it for, it was something like 500 million odd of that money was bank loans, so not actually their assets, and leveraged? Was it against the club and not personal assets?
Yeah, so basically they had a £500 million loan leveraged against the club, which I actually believe to this day is still leveraged against the club. I think just to put into perspective, the club's in about £968 million worth of debt. Like, and at that point, it becomes very negligent and hard to stomach at that level. I know Manchester United's a big institute, but even at this point, I don't think we have enough to pay that for a long time. And that's probably the one thing that the United fan base got behind the Qatari bid, was it was probably our only option to wipe that debt overnight. So yeah, just going through the quick history there, it's like it's been a painful 20 years to get here, but one that we've probably seen plenty of times in football, and hopefully we won't ever see again because of the ownership test.
See, this goes back to what I was saying, Killian. Like, I don't understand how they passed the owner's test. How can you buy a club and 75% of the cost of the club is borrowed money? That just makes no sense.
Now that goes way above my pay grade of knowledge. That seems to be all banking kind of stuff. But that kind of leveraged buyout stuff happens, where it gets confusing for me. Obviously, my club is dealing with fractions of the money, but how can the Glazer ownership being seen so badly, considering for the first half of it there was so much success, and it's not like they're not spending money. So what do United fans have to complain about, Nathan?
Well, that's an interesting point that gets brought up from non-United fans, is how can United fans complain? And I think one of the things that I can probably date back to was when the Glazers took over, there were protests. the fans knew that this was leverage money against the club. Like, this was not money that the Glazers had in hand. So like there was initial protests at the start, and
so this wasn't hidden. It was known.
Oh yeah, it was known, and United fans actively like tried to stop this. So like when like, I know it's just rival fans taking digs sometimes, but when they go, oh, they're going to grab their green and gold scarves because we're losing a game, it's like, we've had them green and gold scarves since the start. You know what I mean? So like it is. I know it's just banter on the fan side, but like, it probably does hit deep in United fans that like no United fan wanted the Glazers to begin with. So to date back to our early success, like, to me that was down to Fergie. Like, I know he gets a lot of criticism for potentially protecting the Glazers, but that was just how good of a manager he was. Now, I know he used the line very often, there's no value in the market, this, that, and the other. There wasn't any value in the market, but I could see how people could see that as protecting the Glazers.
I think the one thing with Fergie that always surprised me is he didn't often say it, but he once championed them as great owners. Now, is that a manager who's looking for a contract or pressure to say it, or is that a manager that's just in the early days?
Or is that a manager that just wants to be left alone and knows if he says the right thing, they're just going to be absent?
Yeah, and like it's one of those, like, even looking back, do you basically, without the Glazers, do you think Fergie could have achieved what he achieved?
100%, yeah.
In that era?
Yeah, I don't think the Glazers had any impact on the success Fergie had. I think at that point he just wanted to be left alone. I think Fergie's genius itself carried United through. In fact, he went to the point of protecting them, in my opinion. So I think like any ownership we had at that point that even invested like the smallest bit of money, we would have seen the same success. So yeah, just going back to the earlier point, is the actual way that Manchester United was taken over cannot happen again. Like you cannot leverage buy out a club anymore. Like it's literally against the rules. So there was no ownership test back then. So like that's how it went through, and I think that's one of the stickling points. In particular, was they should not be our owners in our heads, because they wouldn't be it today if it went the same way. You know what I mean?
That's a hard pill to swallow.
But let's take the how they acquired it aside. Like, we're talking about terrible ownerships here. So Nathan, I'm going to put you on the spot here. 3 points of why the Glazers are terrible owners. Because from my point of view, they went and got big name managers. They went and spent a lot of money and got big names in. Outside of like them having
it's hard
football,
when you're Sunderland and Newcastle.
Aside from having no football knowledge, they kind of did the best they could, didn't they? So like 3 reasons why they're terrible.
I think that's extremely generous. I think number one reason is none of the money is actually the Glazers. The money they use is the club's money. They're going to get that money back regardless. They're buying assets. So whatever money they spent last summer, that money's still in the club through assets. So like them selling that club, they're still getting the same value that they would if they didn't spend the money. So I think that's sort of a myth, is like they've never invested in the club. They've only actually ever taken out. They've been extremely criticised for dividends and that, like, because they've all.
That's interesting you say that, because I'd seen the figures on this, and I may be wrong with the amount here. It's somewhere in the region of 70 to 90 million over between 2015 and 2020 they took out in dividends, and I'd assume that only stopped because COVID came.
Exactly, it actually only stopped because COVID. The fans got on them about it really, really heavily. Because you can't furlough staff and then take 30 million out of the club. Like, it just doesn't work like that. So yeah, that's one of the big things that they were criticised about was taking money out and not putting money in. They never put money in. They were handed the club. So like, I think the second point would be they've never actually put people of high standard in to manage the club. We were very much a club that was held up by Fergie's brilliance, and I think after that we never really moved on. We never got the best in class in to run the club. We never got the right staff in, as director of football. So we've never really tried that model. I know we went with Ralph Radnick last season, But even when he started complaining and pointing out the shortfalls of the Glazers, he was out the door the next week, you know what I mean? So that's definitely number 2. And then number 3, it's to them it's always the fans' fault. The fans are always asking for too much, when in reality the fans have only asked for the bare minimum. I know you might laugh at that as a rival fan, but it's the club's money. Of course they own the club. They can take it, but like you got to put it in as well. So I think like them 3 points altogether just sums up like how miserable and depressing that ownership has been.
So basically, you feel that it's being ran to make the Glazers money, not for success. That they're willing to sacrifice like actual on-field success if they can get another commercial deal, which kind of seemed to be the reason they brought back Ronaldo, because it was nothing to do with football decisions. It was all about having a big name back.
But if anything, bringing back Ronaldo though, Ronaldo kind of, I know he handled it terribly, but like it doesn't sound like he was wrong with what he was saying. Like I think, you know, a major point of that is the fact that Old Trafford isn't one of the Euro 2028 stadiums because it's just falling apart. And can you imagine any way in the Fergie era where England were hosting a tournament and Old Trafford weren't included? It wouldn't happen.
Nathan, you can correct me on this, but I believe it was the Glazers that pulled out of that. Now, that could be down to UEFA wanting them to make upgrades or something, but they pulled out of the running to be a host one rather than not being considered.
Yeah, I believe they pulled out of it in relation to the takeover. It's plans to redevelop the stadium and stuff like that in the future. It's like you can't really commit to a tournament because it will potentially block them plans
if you're not going to be there.
Yeah, so somewhat that's understandable, but it's also very embarrassing that the Etihad will be the go-to in Manchester for the games when you've got such a lovely and historic venue. Now I say lovely, it's very old and looks old and it shows its age, but with me it comes with a lot of pride and memories. Yeah, it's just so like that's probably one of the most upsetting things about Euro 2028 is that you can't fly over to Manchester and go watch good football in Old Trafford.
So this brings us up to, let's say, the last year and a half or so. So in as quick as you can, bring us up to speed up until last week. So Glazers, who was in to buy it? Why is it taking this long? Yeah,
so we're coming up in about a year. I think we're a month off a year since they've called the strategic review. It sort of came out of the blue. We to be honest, it sort of felt like at the time it was a cover up for the Ronaldo stuff because it was very on time with that. Now, and it was very on time with the new manager and stuff like that. So over that year, we've really been dragged through the mud. Like it's been the longest year ever, to the point where most of the fan base have got very bored of it. It seems like repetitive news, repetitive stuff. You don't know if journalists are telling the truth sometimes, because a lot of them have been showing up. Now I know that's not their fault, but it has happened. So like there's been a lot of frustration in the fan base. Obviously there's been two outliers, which has been Sir Jim and Qatar.
I thought you were going to say myself and Killian.
So Sir Jim and Qatar now. They obviously come with their own pretense and what they bring and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think like even on a Newcastle point, I think you can, in these kind of things, even taking the politics out of it, even if you look at it as a straight offer, you know.
Exactly, like as I refer back to what I said earlier, it's like, how can you really turn down as a fan wiping out the debt in a day? It's like a refresh, isn't it? Like it's like a second chance. And
am I right? Am I right in saying that, like, you know, you see tweets flying around, you don't know what's true, and you're our own Fabrizio Romano, so you know what's true and what's not. But in terms of these kind of bringing in Camavinga and Mbappe and all these characters, do you think there was any truth in that, or is that just kind of, oh yeah, I would have done that if I got the club,
like Laporte with Beckham back at Barca?
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think even thinking back to that, it's like that never really came from the Qatar camp. It was sort of like just always journalists putting it out and stuff like that. And it's like, hey, you don't really ever know how much validity is behind that. It's like, there's a very good chance if Qatar did buy it that they bring Mbappe to Old Trafford, like, because they own PSG who contract Mbappe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So things like that. Now, one thing we can say is that they were willing to splash the cash, as we've seen with majority of state ownership models. So you can't imagine that they bring in some big names, and they'd want some big names to kick off their sort of reign of ownership. But I think it was always too skeptical to like go in on the names that were put out there. So I think, yeah, I think looking back, it was all just made up names, and there was no real validity behind it.
So like the ownership, or the battle for potential ownership kind of became hotted up after Todd Bowley took over Chelsea, because Jim Ratcliffe was in line, or he was in one of the final teams to be considered for that takeover. And then he kind of seemed to turn his attention to his boyhood club in United. But I believe like he'd been kind of sniffing around before, that kind of stuff. Where does he fit into the mix up until this week?
Well, the interesting thing with Sir Jim and his bid for Chelsea was he actually came in late on it, which always left people to question what was his true intention behind it. Because, you know, if you actually wanted Chelsea, you'd meet the deadline to buy it.
Oh, so you're saying PR move to get the name out there?
Was it a PR move? Like that'd be my sort of thought behind it. That was possibly a PR move to like, look, I'm on the market looking to buy something.
Was they just trying to get a cheap deal by kind of going, listen, if this taking so long?
Chelsea was pennies on the dollar, really. You know?
But it got rejected out of hand because he didn't meet the deadline. You know what I mean? So like, it's like yeah. So I've always looked at it as sort of as PR move, but like he's always said that the Glazers are just very hard people to work with in terms of coming to a deal. Now, in the last couple of days, we've actually heard that he is going to I'm more than likely work with him. So yeah, I think there's been a huge outrage in recent days that, you know, Sir Jim's sort of flagship was, it's all about legacy, it's all about this and that. And it's like, at the end of the day, do you want your legacy to be, you kept the most hated people in Manchester? It's like,
the only thing is, if he gets 25%, he's not far off that 30% that he can then do what the Glazers did to the previous owners. So like he is opening himself up to a potential total buyout, but kind of alongside that, you obviously have your own sources in and around the club. What are you hearing in terms of like, again, on Twitter, I'm seeing every second person in the club's going to get the sack and get replaced by an Ineos person, which for me, the surprising thing about this is usually if you're a minority minority owner, you don't get the privileges of picking the manager. You don't get the privileges of picking the staff. So is it real?
Well, I think that's part of the deal, is he's coming in at such an inflated price that, you know, the Glazers sort of have to give and take here to the point where they're willing to give over the sporting control. Now, from my understanding, is Joel Glazer loves running United. Like, he makes the day-to-day decisions, like literally day-to-day. Sort of like his little football manager fantasy, I think. So that'll be hard for him.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with football manager fantasies.
I sort of think that would be like hard for him to give up. But all the things we're hearing is he is willing. Now, like, when you guys were running the first part of the show, is I messaged my friend that works at United. I can't say who it is, obviously.
Of course.
But he was basically said that they were in a meeting today and they heard that one of the investors dropped out, which we know who that is, and that one remained. And that this week there will be a board meeting to look at the investment option. And he said more and more.
So it's a serious thing that it is. It's at least on the table.
Yeah. More, and he said more news will be available Friday afternoon. So there's a little snippet for people at home. Not long to wait. But yeah, I think one of the one things I've been struggling with over the last couple of days has been Sir Jim's intentions with it all. As I said, 25% is not a lot. And I don't.
What's the price on the 25%?
1.5 billion.
Oh,
so like, it's
no wonder they're giving him the manager. Christ.
It's a lot of money. So, but some of the things we've been hearing today is some of the people Sir Jim's willing to bring in. Michael Edwards, who used to work at Liverpool, there's apparently been talks about him coming into Sir Jim's team at United.
He just started a company recently, though, didn't he?
Yeah, which is interesting, but I've also heard there's been active talks about it. There's actually been a 3-people panel that I've heard have been in the works, which is Michael Edwards, former CEO at Juventus and PSG, who is actually the CEO of Ineos Sport now, Jean-Claude Blanc. So he's another name being thrown around, and also former head of youth at Tottenham, Paul Mitchell, who's at Monaco right now.
He's the guy I've heard about. He was at Leipzig as well. So
Yeah.
you don't get into the Red Bull group without knowing your shit.
Exactly.
They're serious operators, those three. Like, you know, that's got to excite you as a United fan.
It does, and I think that's the one thing I've taken away from today was a bit of hope in terms of, listen, get the right people in to run the ship. You know what I mean? I think for too long, United's been run very amateur, like as an amateur club. You know, we have people there that really aren't up to the standard. Like, so yeah, it's a bit of a bit of optimism going into the future for that.
Do you think then, off the back of, obviously, if Sir Jim comes in, you know, there's less money available for stadium redevelopment, but if he can bring in operators like that, who knows where the club could go, and hopefully at the top of the table. But do you think that signifies, after what seems like the perfect offer came on the table, that the Glazers just never wanted to fully get rid of it?
I think there's definitely part of that, because in recent days we've actually heard that Qatar put an improved bid in from their one that they made in April. I heard a number in around 5.8 billion, which is actually near the 6 billion that the Glazers wanted. And it's like, if you really wanted to sell at that point, I think you'd settle for...
You'd just get rid of it. Yeah.
They've just always struck me as I don't get their want and desire to hold on to a business that they probably won't earn a commission back off now, dividends wise, because Sir Jim's here. It's like everyone involved in that business, at least from the fan side, hates your guts. It's like, why would you want to be there? You know what I mean?
It stinks of Succession. There's real Logan Roy vibes.
Exactly.
And the kids are running amok, you know.
And just to go back in on the people who are currently running United, it's like you've got John Murtagh, who's our director of football. He was at Everton before. It's like, I'm not going to go in on Everton, but it's like it's
sorry, Everton fans.
It's not the standard that you'd have at a Liverpool or a Chelsea. I know Chelsea's not going to do through the best time, but they've got good operators there. It's just always going for the second option rather than the first one. Like Richard Arnold, who's CEO, he was just the backup to Ed Woodward during his time. It's like, you know, they're not going out and getting the people that they should. Radnick's a perfect point on that. It's like, I think we all saw his big rant where he was like, you know, you need to sign 10 players. Next day he's kicked to the curb. It's like, you know, any talk of having to...
He's speaking truth bombs.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Any talk that they have to spend the extra money, it's like, no, away, go.
So Nathan, what is left to happen, and what will it take to get this deal over the line for Jim to take control?
So there's a board meeting this Thursday where it'll be voted upon. I see it going through now because the only people that will actually be able to vote will be the Glazers.
That's what I was about to say. So outside the Glazers, does anyone have the
no,
choice?
they're the only ones with the actual shares to vote, because
Okay.
I probably should have touched on it earlier, but there's two types of shares at United. There's Class A and Class B.
shares. Yeah.
Glazers is the only one that own the voting power. So it'll be interesting to see what type of shares Sir Jim buys. I don't imagine he'd be buying the ones without the voting power, but it's something we'll have to see. But I think like one thing that people probably look past in Sir Jim's case is the actual amount of teams he actually owns in other sports. We've got cycling, sailing. He has a huge percentage of ownership in Mercedes AMG F1. He owns Nice in France, and he owns a club.
Busy lad.
And he owns a club in Switzerland as well. So there's previous of like ownership of sports teams, which is interesting, and I think it's important to point out that actually it won't be Sir Jim buying it; it'll be Ineos. So it'll be his company that buys it.
The Ineos cycling team are serious operators. Nice are fairly well run. Mercedes AMG very strong. So not knowing too much about him from the outside, if he has any of the operators similar to that, if he can get in, it's going to be only good things for United fans, I think.
Well, I think that's the thing, is Ineos is known for bringing in good operators, and I think that's promising when you hear things of Michael Edwards and Paul Mitchell in the background. It's like, okay, there's a plan to this rather than, just throwing money at the problem, which we've seen in other cases like Chelsea, but we won't touch on that. So yeah, like Ineos look like the real deal. But I must say there's a lot of online outrage about specifically Sheikh Jassim and his bid and pulling out. There's been some proper backlash with that.
So just without getting into the Sheikh Jassim, because as far as United fans are concerned, is he no longer exists. The deal is not going to happen with him, and there's rumours that he might go to Tottenham. The question I would kind of have now with Sir Jim is 25%. Yes, he's getting sporting control, but what's the plan? Is it to get the Glazers out? Is he going to bring in other people to try and take the Glazers on? Where does United end up?
He could still be there. He could still be there with his 25%. Sheikh Jassim or someone else comes back and takes the other 75, and he's shit out of luck,
Well, that's the thing. In recent days, we've heard a bit about having guarantees over the Glazers selling in the coming years. I don't know. I don't know how much I believe that, because it's like, if you wanted to sell, you just sell already. That's my sort of stance on it. It's like, what's the extra 3 or 4 years going to do for you? Are they praying that the stock price goes up? Like, it's not looking promising for them if they're thinking that. So it's
the stock price has always been a big decision maker for the Glazers.
Yeah, because it's a publicly floated company, and it's basically, unless they sell it privately, it's like it's what determines how much money they get out of it, really. So it will, like, I don't know what the long term plan is, because I can't really see it myself. I just hope Sir Jim goes in and gets assurances that the Glazers will sell, otherwise they'll be here for another 20 years.
Well, as we can attest to, there is sunnier days ahead, Nathan, and
I promise there's better days are coming. It may take 20 years, but they're coming. Stay in there.
It's already been 20 years.
You'll just have to accept some cloudy days on the way, though. Just I'll tell you that you're gonna see some rough things happening. Would you keep Ten Hag?
Yes, I'm a huge fan of Ten Hag, and I have been since day one. I think my opinion is he's managed the club through some of the most turbulent times in recent history. Not to mention the ownership struggles, but also the Ronaldo saga, like saga after saga. Some which he's been pointed blame to, which I don't necessarily agree with. But I think the ownership thing has just been something that's been clouded over the club for a year, to the point where just strip Ten Hag of that and just get people above him to do the right things, and I think let him focus on the football.
And just in terms of, I'm going to really put you on the spot here now.
Oh God!
And some of the big players, there's been kind of some discussions over the last few weeks about them. I'm going to give you 3 players. I'm going to fire them at you, and you give me your decision on whether it should be kept, extended contract, let them run out or sell as soon as possible, or just release as soon as, and kind of just end the relationship. Marcus Rashford.
Kept. I think last season he proved how good he can be. I think this season it's been off to a rough start. I think it's just about finding that consistency, and I think you know, I'm not one to make excuses, but the 16 injuries we've had at the start of the season definitely haven't helped him have people around him that are there week in, week out. So definitely keep Rashford.
I used to use that old injury chestnut for Newcastle back in the day. I know that one.
Well. I mean, 16, like, come on. I'm starting to question whether we have club doctors here. Like,
Bruno Fernandes.
Keep. I think he's one of the most underrated midfielders in world football, and
would you keep him as captain?
Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
I think he's the passion that we need a captain at Manchester United, and yeah, he's only really gotten into that position this season. So I know he had it last season, de facto captain or whatever with the Maguire situation, but let him cook.
Onana.
Keep. I've been a little bit worried.
Short term keep, or
I mean, like, how many games are we into the season? 7, 6, 7,
7, 8.
7, 8.
Yeah.
I think we'd see a bit more. Some very poor mistakes to start the season, but I feel like any goalkeeper going into a big club has a huge expectation on them, and I think Manchester United being the number one at that club is probably the biggest expectation in English football is being number one at Manchester United. So keep, yeah, definitely. Now if you told me Sancho, that would be another story, but yeah,
well,
definitely.
The one I was going to ask you now is heart versus head. Scott McTominay.
Sell. I'd sell Scott McTominay. Love the passion. I'm a big passion merchant myself. But I think when push comes to shove, the quality isn't there. I think we see it when we're specifically playing teams where we have possession a lot. Just the playing on the ball, it's sometimes he goes missing. It's just, yeah, I think he'd definitely be a sell for me.
Well, Nathan, thank you so much. This has been beyond enlightening, beyond entertaining, and just really, really enjoyable. I want to thank.
And I look forward to Friday. Forward to Friday and hearing that news.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll definitely be keeping you on speed dial to bring us back up to speed when things do kind of unfurl as they may. My thanks very much to you, Nathan from United Plug. Do you want to tell people where to find you?
UTD Plug. That's really it. That's my jam. Keeping that going and pushing on with that.
And that's on Twitter,
Instagram. Hopefully more platforms soon. But yeah, we'll see.
Fantastic, top quality content. If you're interested in United, or if you're actually just interested in football in general, I find it's actually a great page because it takes away a lot of the not the bad
bullshit, really.
Yeah, not the bad my United fans, but like they have some atrocious opinions, and I don't care. I just want to know what's happening with the club.
Straight facts.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's straight facts, and it's behind the scenes facts. It's a absolutely brilliant page, and thanks again, Nathan. Brilliant.
Appreciate it, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And I just want to say, Connor, before we go, I think United fans are still a little bit kind of. They're too used to the silver spoon. They've had a very, very good for very, very long time. So whilst I do hope the best for their future, I think they also just kind of need to take things with a pinch of salt for the Glazers' tenure.
I think you're lucky Nathan's off the line. I think he may have had something to say about that, but yeah, I think they've definitely squeezed that lemon for all they can. But I would like to see them get new owners to see where they can go.
And we will be keeping up with this story as and when we can. That's us for this week. My thanks to United Plug's Nathan Byrne, of course, and to you, our listener. Thanks very much for sticking with us. And my forever thanks to Not a Punter, Conor Glennon.
Great talking as always, Killian. Can't wait for next week.
We'll chat to you then.
Bye-bye.
I'm not into podcasts.
I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again.
What a hit! Back of the net.